There is a purity and simplicity to mountain bikes, and fitness of the rider aside, a peacefulness too. No need for electricity, no worry about battery life, no worry about what type of people you hang out with, or if your motor or battery or display will be superseded next year. Just rider and bike, the only thing affecting your ride will be your skill and your fitness. So in front of me, the most basic of decisions people have to make when buying an MTB. We have a low to mid assist track fuel EXE, a full power track rail, and of course a traditional analog fuel EX. Now my challenge today is to guide you through some of the questions that you should be asking to enable you to buy the right bike. When I chose my first MTB many moons ago, I think it's now nearly 13,000 moons, all I had to think about was what brand and what model. Nothing else had to be factored in. An MTB was an MTB. Now we have categories and families and crazy amounts of models and colours and upgrades and, well, that's not even introducing EMTB. Now you might, at this juncture, be fully expecting me to denounce the traditional MTB over the new EMTB bikes, but that's simply not true. I spent 30 years racing, riding and photographing these bikes, and they are fantastic in the right place. I really wondered how I'd shoot this. Is it a progression from fuel to fuel EXE to rail? Or are these three so different that a comparison is invalid? Comparing apples to oranges? Well, a lot of people have to choose between having an apple or an orange. And we've had a lot of feedback from you guys over the past few months about these three bikes. Now the first one is from Feng, who says it depends on how strong your legs are. I actually switched back from full power to analog now and really felt the weight of my 60-pound full fat e-bike. When I rode my friend's EXE, wow, it felt unreal and so natural. And this is a great comment from Zed, who says, having just rode the fuel EXE for a few weeks and then changed over to the rail, the difference between the two is huge. You need to be honest with what you really want. For me though, the process just confirmed that I want an e-bike, not an analog bike. So getting a bike more like an analog bike does not make any sense. Okay guys, let's get back to the apples and oranges comparisons, and starting off with a quick fire of the differences between the three bikes. Now first of all, suspension travel. We've got 140, 150, 150, 160 and again 140, 150 on this bike. Now guys, it's not just about those numbers, it's the design of the suspension which counts as well. So there's a very different feel between the Fuel EX, the Fuel EXE and the track rail. But more than that, if you look at these bikes, we've got a Zeb on this bike, we've got a 36 on here, and we've got a Lyric on there. So the chunkier fork on here, the fact it's got a slightly longer wheelbase and different suspension design is going to give the bike a different feel. Now when we look at wheel size, both the Fuel EXE and the Rail both have 29-inch wheels front and rear. However, the beautiful Fuel EX has the possibility of going 29, 27.5 or 29 front and rear simply by flipping the Mino link there. You can also adjust the suspension progression on this bike, which I'll talk about a bit later. Motors, obviously the Fuel EX does not have a motor, whereas the Rail has a Bosch Performance CX 85 Nm and the Fuel EXE, that very well recognised TQ super quiet motor, 50 Nm. Now, before we go into the next section, which is the human element and your interaction with the bikes, which I think is a critical part of the comparison story, there's one comment again here from Zed, who says, the difference between these bikes are more about the overall speed and pedaling effort. Don't make the mistake of thinking it's all about the handling. Now, if you turn our attention now to the usage side of things, how much time you'd possibly spend on each bike. Now, on the Fuel EX in my local trail centre, I will do a climb and a descent, a good 3 to 4 minutes solid downhill trail style descent. I'll probably do one climb descent every 14 minutes. So I can do probably 1,600 feet of climbing per hour and 4 downhill runs. If you multiply that by say 4 hours, obviously you've got 6,500 feet of climbing, and what is that, 16 runs in 4 hours. So that would be like a traditional sort of day out for me. Obviously everyone's different. Trek rail on the other hand is a very different beast. On the same climb and descent, I'm looking at doing about 7 of those in an hour. So 7 climbs, 7 descents, about 2,800 feet of up and down. That is quite a physical hour, and if you multiply that by say 4 hours, you're looking at over 11,000 feet of climbing and descending, 28 downhill runs. And I can assure you 28 downhill runs will take its toll on your body. So in as much as some people will say that the analog bike is more physical, that's actually not true when you get the times up on the hill. So the Fuel EXE on the other hand is actually a little bit in between, obviously, because it's got 50 Newton meters compared to the 85 Newton meters on the rail. So what the Trek is great at is taking the sting out of those climbs, which prolongs your day out on your bike. Of course, there's another side to this story, isn't there? I mean, it depends largely on where and how you ride. I mean, if you rode trail centers, you know, maybe the Fuel EXE or the Fuel EX is a great bike. If you ride with uplift, maybe the Fuel EX is the only bike you'll ever need. But what you need to bear in mind is, be honest with yourself, how many times you ride per month. So those numbers I just mentioned will multiply the more you ride every month. So like, say you go out 6 times a month, you'll see that the figures are pretty vast between the two. And the other thing you need to bear in mind is the calorie count when you ride all these 3 bikes. I think it's a very interesting subject, which we will cover in a future video, but you could argue that it's almost the same. And at the same time, you need to figure in your ability to sustain a ride. How long can you go for on the Fuel EX? How long can you go for on the Fuel EXE? And, you know, can you actually do that amount of runs in a day on the Trek rail? 28 runs is a lot of runs. Now, I feel like I need to give you guys some conclusion to this riding element of the comparison. And do you know what? I've never actually said this before, but I do agree that I do actually think that full power EMTBs are kind of a different sport, because what they enable you to do, especially if you're a heavier rider, is tackle those super technical climbs, those big adventure rides, the slippy banks, slippy rocks, you name it. At the same time, if you are a lighter rider and you have got good strength, the Fuel EXE and the Fuel every day of the week. Well, look, that's what I think, at least, and I'm sure everybody's got a different take on this, but some great comments from you guys from, as mentioned, that previous trip we did to the Lake District. This first one's from Alex, who says, having ridden standard EMTBs, I would not buy one. Having ridden a Fuel EXE, I would. The difference in ride experience is huge. A lightweight EMTB is a help up a hill. Riding the full power EMTB is a different sport altogether. One enhances the ride, one changes it altogether. So there you go. Nice. I seem to be agreeing there with you, Alex. And then EDHCB, I'm not considering ditching my Rail 9.7 for a lighter duty EMTB until I get to the point that I'm climbing the steepest, most technical section of trail in eco mode. Guys, I'd love to give you all the different prices of all the different models of each of these bikes, because I think it's a very crucial part in any kind of comparison. But because I've got these bikes here, I'm going to give you the prices of the top end bikes. So Fuel EX top end is 11,800. The top end Trek rail is 12,950. And the winner in terms of price is the Fuel EXE at £13,500. But forget about price for just 1 minute. With the Fuel EX, this, ladies and gentlemen, is the simple life. You can get a Fuel EX for as little as £2,600. That weighs only about 15.7 kilos. Now that's about a quarter of the price of a top-end version, and it'll still go up hills at roughly the same speed. With the Fuel EXE and the rail on the other hand, you're going to be extending the range of your ride. It's almost a few £1,000s more, but how does that equate to ride time? You're getting the e-bike system too, which is the motor, the battery, the display, the remote, the software and the app. You're getting time as well, and quality time on the bike, more runs, more fun possibly. Our comparison journey of oranges and apples, lemons and pears now switches to batteries, and I've got a stick. Now, the Trek Fuel EXE has got a 360 watt hour internal battery on this bike, which you can pop out. You can also have a range extender on there as well, which weighs, I think, 1 kilo. It's not only one battery in this bike, you've also got the axis shifting, you've got the axis seat post, and of course tyre whiz in the wheels front and back, which this bike, even though it's an analog bike, that too has got 4 batteries: axis, seat post, axis gearing, and of course the tyre whiz. And finally the track rail, 750 watt-hour battery in the down tube. It too has tyre whiz front and rear, which is an automatic tyre pressure sensors and checkers. And of course we have got the axis shifting, but on this bike is actually a standard cable seat post. Can you believe it? Now when we turn to the noise that each of these bikes produce, what we have here in the EXE is what's widely regarded as the quietest e-bike motor on the market in the harmonic pin ring design TQ HPR50. It is super quiet. But moving over now to the Fuel EX. Now it's quite funny, no motor, but I guarantee you the noise of me climbing a steep climb on this bike will be louder than both the EXE and the rail. And then finally the rail. Now guys, apologies for the bike being slightly dirty, but I simply use it loads, and that says quite a lot, doesn't it? But then again, I am 95 kilos and I love big days out in the mountains. Anyway, the noise of the Bosch motor. It is slightly louder than the HPR50, but then again, it's a lot more power. It's 85 newton meters, but nonetheless, I guarantee you, the noise of that motor, again, is quieter than me riding the EX up the hill. When it comes to the maintenance costs, irrespective of what model you choose, although having said that, I think it's widely regarded that the more expensive things such as cassettes do actually last longer. The maintenance costs, obviously, you're going to be doing more riding, more runs on the e-bikes than you are on the analog bike, in theory. So more riding actually means more maintenance costs. And then one final thing is, which is where the Fuel EX might score, and that is the distance you can ride in 1 hour. Now that is quite dependent obviously on the terrain you ride. But on the flat, and if you're riding say above 25 kph, which the e-bikes are restricted to, or indeed 35 kph, then maybe you could actually go further on the Fuel EX than you could on the e-bikes. I'm just taking time to appreciate the Trek Fuel EX, because as I mentioned earlier, I did spend 30 years riding these bikes without motors, and you know, I love the fact that they're free of the worry of charging, although I guess on this bike you have got the SRAM axis and the tyre whiz batteries to worry about. But this bike, some of the fine detail which I might have missed, and I really don't want you guys to miss it. This is a Project 1 bike, which means this is custom painted. But there's some really cool features on this bike. I think the fact that you can adjust the leverage rate on it, so that in turn means you can adjust the geometry of the bike. You can have it high and steep or slack and low. The bike, believe me, is an absolute flying machine. A very cool feature on this bike is that there are actually size specific chainstays on the bike. So as the bike's increase in size from small up to extra large, so too does the chainstay length on it. What else have we got? Oh, of course, the wheels now. Trek Bontrager offer a free wheel replacement service if you get any problems with the wheels, which I think is a fantastic feature. So yeah, I think as a do-it-all, going up, going down, trail riding bike, this is possibly one of the finest on the market. I think when it comes to comparisons and decisions, this could be the biggest step lots of people face, the decision to go from analog to electric power. But I think when you've got a bike like the EXE, which, let's face it, visually is pretty much identical to the EX, then I think it makes that decision slightly easier. I mean, yes, there is say a few kilo difference in the weight between that bike and that bike. There's a couple of £1,000, well, not quite, but let's face it, you've got a motor, a battery, the software, you've got the top tube display which is integrated in there, and you've also got the controller. So you also got an app as well, remember, so you're getting quite a lot more added features on the e-bike compared to the analog bike. And finally, folks, the Trek Rail. Look, it's a wilder ride than the other two bikes, but of course it's going to be. It's got a more punchy motor, it's longer, it's slacker, and it's going to enable you to tackle more difficult descents as well as ascents. So as a fruit, I think it's absolutely rotten and I love it to bits. So folks, we're all different. We all ride different trails, different countries. So I think these are 3 fantastic tools for different types of riding. Please let us know what your choice is, and we'll see you in the comments.